Welcome to Tell Me More, Coffee with Chris Yip, the official podcast of the Faculty of Applied Science and Engineering at the University of Toronto. Each month, I sit down with someone from our vibrant global community to talk about what places them at the heart of designing bold solutions for a better world. You'll meet alumni, students, and professors who are making a difference across a range of fields, including some where you may not expect to find them. My guest today is alumnus David Boroto, a graduate of our engineering science program and later of the University of Cambridge. Throughout his career, he has been a passionate advocate for using infrastructure engineering to impact and improve the lives of low-income people in a sustainable way. Earlier this year, he was named CEO of Engineers Without Borders Canada. Amazing. Wonderful. David, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a fun conversation. For those who, I don't even know when people are going to listen to this, but you were just on Disruptors and Dilemmas. I'm recording this now. This is probably about a month ago,
Just
maybe?
about, yeah.
Talking about this very same topic.
It's a topic I love talking about. So any opportunity to talk about infrastructure for good, how you can use your engineering, technical skills for a greater purpose, always be part of that conversation. Infrastructure is a fascinating topic because I think it's very much the backbone of our society, underpins many of the services and the way that we kind of move through life. But when done well, it's in the background and so often goes unnoticed. But I think when you're an infrastructure engineer, I think your base problem that you're solving for is how can I build this safely, efficiently, and cost effectively in a way that will last its intended design life or even longer. And then you throw in the question of sustainability, which has so many different implications. And I think the definition of sustainability that I love the most is being able to think for the future and the next generation designing for today without compromising the needs for the future generation.
There
we
go.
go. And when you're thinking about infrastructure, like that's the horizons that you have to be thinking about, the centuries long horizons. And so you have an immense challenge already, and then you think about the social aspect to it, the environmental climate aspect to it, the who is this infrastructure serving, and what are the underserved communities that maybe need to benefit from this infrastructure. When you add all of those different perspectives, then I think you can see it's a pretty complex field.
You grew up in South Africa, right? And so tell us about South Africa, and then how did you land in U of T engineering?
Yeah. So my family is Congolese, actually. So
Cool.
all my heritage goes back to the Democratic Republic of Congo. And in 1991, my parents moved to South Africa.
Okay.
So was born and raised there. But, it's an interesting dynamic being in South Africa as a born and raised natural citizen South African with your heritage somewhere else. And in the time that my parents moved, obviously, Mandela had just come out of prison.
Right.
They were transitioning to a democratic country, and then Mandela gets elected in 94. So you're in a country that's kind of going through a lot of transition and transformation. Anyways, fast forward to 2010, my family moves to Canada and arrived in Saskatchewan, went to high school in BC, so really bounced around all of Canada. And when it came time for university, I think I was looking all over the place, including U of T. Came for a visit. This would have been April 2013, and visited the campus, visited the city, and absolutely fell in love with it. And the thing that made me then come to U of T was when I went home, a week or so afterwards, got an offer letter in the mail and told my mom her elation at hearing that I'd gone into U of T above everywhere else was the thing that said, okay, that's a place where I'm going to go.
Cool. And then you went into engineering science. At the time, was infrastructure there?
Exactly.
Okay.
And I went into infrastructure. And so my dad is an engineer. And
nice.
so that's kind of my avenue into engineering. My dad sat me down and said, him and I are very similar people. And as an engineer, if you have that foundation, you can go off and do anything, is what he told me back then. And it really is true.
Yeah.
In engineering, obviously, you learn technical skills of, for me in infrastructure, how to build a bridge or design a building or design a road. But it's really rooted in problem solving. How do you take a problem that's in front of you and dissect it and analyze it and frame it in such a way that it can be addressed? And that problem-solving mindset is something I think that I've always had within me. When I think back to Praxis One, they showed the video of the knack.
Right.
It's like you have the knack. That's
Right.
why you're in this room. And so it was my dad kind of inspiring me to go into engineering, which is how I got here. And I've never been someone who deals in the micro, and so when it came to something like ECE or bio, or they didn't really call to me, versus infrastructure is very much in the macro and thinking about it's a tangible world that we interact with. Right. And we're very much designing the cities that we interact in, the streets and the buildings. And so that tangible aspect of it drew me towards the infrastructure option. And then more and more, as my interest in development started to take shape, because that's something that always grew with me since we moved to Canada, thinking about how can I have an impact, not only in the world, but I'll call, my home country of South Africa, my parents' home country of Congo, and taking a Pan-Africanist view of it, just on the continent as a whole, seeing the potential that infrastructure has in transforming the lives of people all over the world really drew me into that option. And that's how I found myself where I am now.
You're now the CEO of EWB,
Yeah.
right? So, but if you went back to when you came into engineering, you joined it in your first year.
Third day on campus.
Third day
actually.
on campus. It's like
Clubs Fair,
Clubs
went straight
Fair.
to the booth.
There you go,
Yeah.
right there. Boom, I'm going to sign up.
Yeah.
Why was this so important to you? I mean, was it?
When my family moved from South Africa, one thing my dad said that really stuck with me is that you never forget where you come from. Mm-hmm. And so for him, what that means is, he's never forgotten the community that raised him in Congo. Right. It's a village called Kalole, maybe 40 kilometers outside of Bukavu in eastern Congo. He goes home as often as he can, maybe a few times every few years. Still gives back to his community, cool. Supports kids' education there and everything like that. And so for me, never having lived fully in Congo, when I moved to Canada, that took a very Pan-Africanist view of how can I contribute to the development of this continent on the whole. And so it was the summer before first year. I was looking through the U of T clubs page, like what are these organizations that are right. doing good that I can use my engineering skills for a greater purpose, let's say. And EWB was the one that stood out on the list. When I joined, I saw it as an organization that, maybe just sending people overseas to try and, quote unquote, save Africa and the outdated development model. What I quickly found, though, was a community of very bright, intelligent people who are inquisitive and asking tough questions about the development sector writ large and how we go about international development as Canadians or people in Canada. And being a part of such a group of bright individuals sparked my own curiosity about how do I want to go about development right. in my own right. And not only then do I get to meet the people in my own chapter, going to national conferences at EWB, which are a spectacle in and of their own right, meeting people across the country who are thinking about the same thing, who are acting on the same thing, and then having the opportunity through EWB to get a couple of overseas experiences, one in Kenya kind of in the first 4 months of my PY, and then once immediately after graduating. These are experiences that formed how I view the world, formed how I view the development sector, and formed how I view the role of infrastructure in improving the lives of others.
So it's interesting what you just said, because it's really easy to go virtual and get there's a problem. But actually, you need to be there.
100%.
You need to go in, understand the real challenges, and
experience it.
Experience it, because it's so easy to say, well, here's the solution, and I can do this. But when you go there and you realize, wow, actually the infrastructure I need to do this isn't actually here, and wait, your power's not running constantly, yep. or it's actually doing this. And just that whole sort of take the student out of the local comfort zone and put them into a different type of comfort zone, right? Those are things that are skills that are hard to teach, right? Until you can experience it. So I just put this out there that since I started as dean, I wanted 100% of students to have an international experience, right? And so I'm trying hard to get this to happen. But things like Engineers Without Borders, going on these trips, Engineers in Action type of things where you are going kind of in country for a bit, it's the global community, right?
Yeah.
That we're trying to engage with.
And it's a global community that you're creating
Yes.
as well, facilitating those relationships. You know, there's Ashna Jain. She was the president of the U of T EWB chapter a few years ago, and was one of our Canada Africa Innovation Fellows. I think in the year that it was virtual, because we started that program virtually right before the pandemic really, I guess, faded away.
Oh, yeah.
And so she engaged virtually with the team of Ugandan students, developed a solution to the problem that they'd identified there. And I think just this past year, her and her family traveled to Uganda, visited the team that they're working with, visited their families, visited Herbert, who's our Africa Programs Manager, Director of African Programs and Partnerships, who's based in Kampala. And, you know, I agree with you 100%, and I'm very much behind your goal of giving 100% of students an opportunity to go on an international opportunity. And however I can help with that, you know, we'll figure that one out
for sure.
But I think even the thing we found there is, even with a virtual interaction, that relationship that was connected formed a friendship that allowed her to go and visit and have someone there who can show her around and help her experience Uganda, I guess, more realistically. And I think that's the power of a global community.
I want to cycle a little bit back. So you finished at U of T. Did you go right then to Cambridge after U of T, or did you?
No, yeah. So the story of after U of T.
After U of
T. And it's whenever I tell people, you know, it's like, say, where are you from? It's like, how much time do you have? Because I've moved around quite a bit. So after U of T, this would have been second semester of my fourth year. I had no idea what I wanted to do after graduating, but I'd been involved with EWB for 5 years at that time. I had told many people about, you know, EWB's long-term fellowship programs, and I was pushing the folks who are graduating in years before me, like, hey, take a plunge at this overseas experience and maybe forego a bit of that traditional career path for a couple of years at least, and see if you can make a life in social impact and social entrepreneurship. And when it came time for me to graduate, I said, well, I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't do this myself.
Walk.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so applied for an EWB fellowship, ended up working for a social enterprise called Viamo. Mm-hmm. I was in their Uganda office, but they're all across Africa and some parts of Asia as well. They're a mobile technology platform that, you know, at least a part of it that I worked on, providing people access to information no matter what kind of phone you had. The platform that you could call into and get access to news, weather, agricultural services, health information, games, all that type of stuff. Really democratizing information for folks living in rural areas who didn't have access to it. So I was there as a data analyst and talking about, you know, the role of technology and AI in infrastructure. You know, I saw through my PUI, you know, I did the second 12 months of my PUI at IBI Group, and I had a manager who was really big into data analytics, and, you know, learning under him saw the role that data and analytics will play in infrastructure for the future, thinking of smart cities, thinking of autonomous vehicles, etc. And so I wanted to build out that skill set a little bit, hence going into a data analyst role. And so I spent just under a year in Uganda with EWB as a fellow, working for Viamo right after I graduated. A really fascinating time, I think, because one, Kampala is a fantastic city. It's very, you know, people say New York is a city that never sleeps. Kampala is similarly so. Different scale, but there's a level of activity and chaos and just splendor that happens in Kampala that I think many other cities can't match. So I loved living in Kampala, talking about just having a different lived experience. Viamo itself was a great place to work, and I think an interesting one being in a social impact organization in Uganda. So I really enjoyed that opportunity. But then, you know, March 2020, something called COVID happens, and most EWB fellows get recalled back. And so I spent about 4 months living with my mom in Regina during the pandemic, figuring out, again, what are the next steps. And out of the blue, you know, my dream job falls on my lap, working for the United Nations Office for Project Services in their strategic initiatives team. And that's a fascinating role because on the one hand, they're a think tank thinking about the role that infrastructure has to play in to achieve different development outcomes, be it the SDGs, addressing climate change, gender equality, all of that. And then there's also a consulting side of it, working with governments in low and middle income countries, advising them on how they develop and plan their infrastructure and then how they go about securing financing for their infrastructure.
Right.
So a fascinating year living in Copenhagen, working for the UN. And it was then my manager there who had graduated from Cambridge from that program. He said, "Hey, you seem like the type of guy who'd be interested in that type of program."
Right.
And applied. Surprisingly, I will say, got in. Was super, super fortunate to have the opportunity to go to that program. And I spent the year in Cambridge then studying in engineering for sustainable development, thinking about the role that engineers have to play in tackling climate change and addressing issues of sustainability. So it was a bit of a longer path to get from U of T over to Cambridge. But what I'll say is I think those 2 years that I took outside of school were very beneficial in shaping then one thinking of going to Cambridge in the first instance and what I ended up making of my time there.
Yeah. So and then you did consulting work.
Yeah.
Right. And then came back to EWB. Or you're doing both.
Yeah.
It's kind of confusing.
I never left EWB as much as I've tried. So when I came back from Uganda, I joined the board of directors. So for the past 5 years or so, I was always on the board of directors. I think I was chair of the board for 3. And I was doing that, while I was in Denmark, while I was in Cambridge. And then when I moved back to Toronto and worked in engineering consulting for Mott MacDonald, off the side of my desk, and then in my after hours was doing things here and there for EWB as well. So EWB's never left me. I've never left EWB. And it was, I guess, 4 months ago then when the opportunity came to first, I guess, step in as interim CEO while we went through a transition, and then throw my hat in the ring for the permanent position. And I think it's a testament to how much EWB has been a part of my life, how much it has meant to me, that I feel so fortunate now to be in the position to lead the organization as we go into the future.
Probably during your interview, someone would say, "Hey, David, what are your goals as CEO?" Is there a term limit, or is it's just you're in there for whatever?
It's open-ended.
Okay, cool. So sustainable goals.
From day one, I'm already thinking to when I leave this organization, when I leave this role, what place do I want it to be at? And I think in the first instance, I think my measure of success will be if I'm standing in a crowd at an EWB national conference and I can look out and confidently say that the next CEO of EWB is in that room, because we have fostered such a strong community of young leaders who care about using their skills for social good, that our community will be, the breeding ground, let's say, for our talent and the people who are going to lead this organization to impact, but the engineering sector as a whole to impact. And so, my title is CEO, but I think really I see myself as a community builder, first and foremost, and someone who can inspire our sector to think beyond just the technical and also think towards the social impact.
Yeah. And I think that's so important. We're seeing more and more of our students doing that. We're seeing more and more students doing PY positions with a social impact angle associated with it. Students who are not totally invested in supporting a for-profit, in a sense. They really want to use their engineering skills in different ways. And I think it's wonderful to hear and to see.
And even, I can speak, when I was in the private sector at Mott MacDonald, you could hear it informed the way that we went about recruitment and the way that we talked about ourselves as a company and the way that we, made decisions internally about, different projects that we take on and things like that. Is what does this generation of young engineers, what are the things that they want to be working on? What's the type of company that they want to be in? And so that desire from this generation of students is very much shaping the landscape of engineering across the country in the private sector. And I think it's remarkable because in the face of the number of challenges that we have going on in the world today, for our generation to then say, I'm up for that challenge. Let
Right.
me dedicate myself towards that is fantastic. And so for us as an organization, we see that energy and want to amplify it and make sure that it's directed in the right ways to make sure that folks are not only equipped technically to know
Right.
how to solve these problems, but also equipped, socially, thinking about the financial economic side of it, thinking about the community and the impact side of it, taking that broader, systems approach,
Right.
we like to call it.
I mean, we think all the time with our Iron Ring, we think about our duty of care and obligation to public safety, right? And we need to be thinking a lot about where the impact of
Yeah.
the technologies that we've got.
You'd mentioned the iron ring.
Yeah.
And, I have 2 rings on my pinky finger. One's the iron ring, and the other one is what we call the circle of the baobab. It's the EWB version of the iron ring. And,
Cool.
when I look at that, I think of my obligation as an engineer to solving social issues
Right.
and creating a greater good. And
That's cool.
It's similar,
Right.
It's that obligation as an engineer to use your skills in your career for a greater purpose. And just as we have a community of engineers that are, who care about their duty to society, we want to take it that step further as well. And that's a community that we're trying to create. Our sector is now being pushed not only to think about how can I create the next cool thing that's going to, change the world, but how can I do so in a responsible way that not only has a positive social impact on the people who are going to be using it, but can also serve the people who are underserved, who are harder to reach, and who might not, benefit from this technology right away because of barriers due to income or geography or whatever else. And I think it's that next step of the challenge that I don't quite think our sector was thinking about as much, let's say, in the past. I think we're starting to think about quite a bit more today.
Yeah, and I think it really is a consequence of, we started talking about Canadian engineering, but it's sort of
Yeah.
engineering at U of T. Engineering at U of T it's not just Canadians per se. It's a global community that we're bringing in,
100%.
right? And we're impacting a global community, and so
And
as
creating
I said,
those cross-cultural touch
Right.
points and collaborations and understanding the different lived experiences that people have. I love seeing our chapter just here because there's so many people who international students who've come here from another country or maybe have lived here like I did,
Yeah.
came at the 10 to 13 age and had a bit of that mixed experience of being born in one place and raised here. But there's so much of that lived experience from different parts of the world that we're able to bring, and it creates such an enriching environment and a community
Right.
for learning, because it's, we talk about the value of diversity, of how having people's brains work differently all in the same room. That's what conducive for magic.
it's a testament to the environment we create at U of T, the Canadian context. Like, people want to be here. Canada is such an open country.
Yeah.
And we welcome that diversity of thought. And engineering, we throw 1,400 kids from different communities, different contexts, each with a unique perspective, different countries, different language. We throw
Yeah.
them all together, and it's amazing what comes out.
To your point earlier, when you can tack on that international experience to it as well, it's a game changer
Yeah.
in terms of just the lived experience and what that brings you, what that adds to your tool belt. I'll share a story in that I met an alumni of EWB recently named Dan Olson. He was our director of governance and rural infrastructure in Ghana around 2010. He since worked for Metrolinx and is now at TTC in their asset management team. And when I spoke to him, he said all the skills he uses today in his job of, stakeholder engagement, of working in complex systems, et cetera, are all things that he learned as an EWB director in Ghana,
Right.
working with government officials and stakeholders there, planning for their rural infrastructure. And it's a very beautiful thing to be able to say that Dan, a Canadian engineer, learned something from his Ghanaian counterpart working there
Yeah,
that is
yeah.
now applying to his job, making Toronto's transit better.
Yeah, that's a wonderful story.
It's beautiful
Yeah,
because you often think about, yes, what can we as Canadians bring and teach, people around the world, but the value of the international experience is not bringing yourself over and becoming a teacher, but it's learning from something, from a different culture, from a different context, and applying that here. And the more you can get that, the stronger a student and the stronger an engineer we're going to create.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for listeners who might be interested in maybe in following your footsteps? I mean, you've hinted at a lot of things, right? Take advantage of the international fellowships and pursue curiosity. But do you have any other nuggets of wisdom?
Yeah. I think the thing that's allowed me to discover, I think, where I want to have an impact in this world using infrastructure for good and empowering those around me, the engineering community, to do so as well, was a result of, one, asking myself those tough questions of, where am I best suited to have an impact, and what are the issues that I want to tackle? Because there's going to be so many issues in the world to tackle. There are so many, and it's easy to get distracted. But I think if you ask yourself that hard question, you can quickly narrow down on it, and then talk to people. There's so many people who have walked the path in front of you, who have their own learnings, their own battle scars, their own mistakes, and you won't be the first person walking down that road. So learn from the people who've done it before you. I think when you do those two things, I found that it helped me carve out that space where I want to have an impact, and it's gratifying not only for myself in terms of giving me clarity of where I can go, but now I can talk to other people as well and bring others into that movement, others who also care about the same thing that we do. And then when you create that community, you're only amplifying your opportunity for impact. It's not just one person alone who's going to create the change that we need to see.
Awesome. David, thank you so much.
It's a pleasure.
This has been a wonderful conversation.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
I love nerding out about infrastructure, talking about our community and what it means to be an engineer, all of it.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed it.
No, this is terrific. Thank you so much.
Cheers.
Yeah. Thanks again for listening to Tell Me More, Coffee with Chris Shipp. If you want to catch up on past episodes and to make sure you don't miss the next one, please subscribe. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and more. Just look for Coffee with Chris Shipp. You can also check out at U of T Engineering on Facebook, Instagram, X, and LinkedIn for more stories about how our community is building a better world. And finally, if you'd be inspired to join us, we'd love to welcome you. If you're thinking of taking a degree or working with us on our research projects, you can find us online at engineering.utoronto.ca, or you can visit our beautiful campus in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I hope I can join you for coffee soon.